Creative control. Are there two words more feared in all of pro wrestling? Well, maybe Vince McMahon, but that's a whole different story. Giving a wrestler control over their own destiny can sometimes be a good thing, but it's often associated with big stars flexing their big egos to make everything worse for everybody involved. Hey, sometimes in wrestling, free will isn't always the best thing. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 times a wrestler exercised a creative control clause. Join us. Number 10, Lesnar turns down Wyatt. Starting with a recent example, we turn to a man who's done things on his own terms for the vast majority of his career. Since his return to WWE in 2012, Brock Lesnar has been presented as a special attraction and one of the biggest stars in the company. As a result of this superstar status, Lesnar has been afforded a certain amount of say in who he works with. Or in this case, who he doesn't work with. According to reports, Lesnar was offered a chance to do a program with Bray Wyatt that would culminate at WrestleMania 39. This could have been a nice way to right the wrongs of Mania 32, where the two men were supposedly meant to fight before Wyatt got injured. However, for one reason or another, Lesnar pulled the plug and plans were changed. Maybe we'll never fully know for sure why the Beast declined an opportunity to face the Eater of Worlds, or maybe he just wanted to have his 5-star classic with Omos instead. Number 9, it's not Vader time. The late great Big Van Vader was one of the most unique wrestlers to ever grace the planet. His freakish combination of size, power, and agility made him a main event player wherever he went. Well, almost everywhere, that is. The Mastodon was brought into WWE in 1996, and by SummerSlam of that year, he was fighting for the world title against Golden Boy Shawn Michaels. Oh dear, Shawn Michaels in the mid-90s and a list about backstage meddling. Not going to end well, this, is it? The plan was for the two men to have a multi-month program over the belt. Shawn would defend at SummerSlam, drop the title at Survivor Series, and then win it back at Royal Rumble in his hometown of San Antonio. Sounds good, eh? Well, too bad, because it never happened. Instead, HBK used his backstage pull and got the series cut down to the one SummerSlam match. This was one of the last times Vader was ever taken seriously as a main eventer. It's unclear whether Shawn made this call before or after he stomped Vader's head in for real, but either way, dick move. Number 8, the Warrior stays good. SummerSlam 1992 remains the greatest thing to happen in the United Kingdom since the introduction of Greggs. The match most talked about at SummerSlam 1992 is, of course, Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog for the Intercontinental title. And so it should, it is a classic, but there was another pretty decent title match further down the card. Randy Savage defended his WWE Championship against the Ultimate Warrior, with Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect looming over the entire thing. It was speculated that one of the two good guys would join up with the baddies, turning evil in the process. Allegedly though, Warrior outright refused to turn heel. In fact, Jim Hellwig never portrayed a villain in his entire WWE career. And that's a shame, because if fans knew how much of a knob he was behind the scenes, they'd have booed him like crazy. Hey, maybe Vince should have asked that little kid to tell Warrior he was turning heel. That way he would have done so whether he wanted to or not. Number 7, keeping it out of the family. Let's move over to WCW now, a place that could politely be described as the inmates running the asylum. The company became famous for its wackiest storylines in its later years, thanks in no small part to the acquisition of Vince Russo as head writer. Listing all of Russo's weirdest ideas would take far too long, plus he would probably come after me on Twitter, and I just don't have the energy. That said, one of his masterpieces, heavy sarcasm there, was the mystery surrounding the father of Stacy Keibler's baby. We were all led to believe it was David Flair, Stacy's on-air squeeze at the time. But before you could say swerve bro, the pregnancy was revealed to be fake. Was this the plan all along? Of course not, this was WCW in 2000. One of the original ideas was to reveal David's father Rick as Stacy's baby daddy, but the Nature Boy refused to do the storyline as he considered it in bad taste. And seriously, when Ric Flair says you've gone too far, then you've really gone too far. So, who was the other candidate? Vince Russo himself, obviously. Number 6, Jericho doesn't make the list. Sticking with WCW now, and a feud that took place behind the scenes but not in front of the cameras. In 1998, both Bill Goldberg and Chris Jericho were making big names for themselves. Goldberg was the undefeated World Heavyweight Champion, whilst Jericho was the slick-talking, cowardly villain of the Cruiserweight division. A feud between the two began, in which Jericho would continually mock Big Bill. He even stole his entrance one week, which may or may not have inspired the character of Gilberg. Although Jericho didn't use any sparklers, the hack, so maybe it didn't. Anyway, Y2J held up his end of the bargain and put in some great work, but the man wanted nothing to do with him. He didn't see Jericho as a legitimate challenger, so refused to participate in the feud. This sounds like the sort of thing management should have worked out before going with the storyline, you know? This led to legitimate bad blood between the pair, resulting in a real-life scuffle when they were both signed to WWE. A scuffle that Jericho reportedly won, by the way. Guess we know now why Goldberg was ducking him for so long. Number 5, Cena buries the Nexus. Surely the guy who's granted more Make-A-Wish wishes than anyone else in the world hasn't misused his backstage sway? Surely not our Johnny? Well, prepare to have your heart broken. Big Match John has famously halted the rise of some young wrestlers, and perhaps the worst example of this came at SummerSlam 2010. Cena was leading his team of WWE loyalists against the Nexus, 7 of the rookies from the original season of NXT. Instead of giving the exciting new faction a big win on pay-per-view, Cena overcame a DDT on the concrete floor to beat both Justin Gabriel and Wade Barrett and score the win for his team. Not hard to see where the whole Super Cena thing comes from, is it? Allegedly, the 16-time world champion was the one who lobbied for him to take the DDT on the concrete and then make a comeback. Whilst he may not have been solely responsible for the Nexus losing, this spot completely took everyone out of the match and made the group look even weaker than they already did. Number 4, that's the bottom line. When you are one of the biggest and most important wrestlers of all time, chances are you're going to be afforded a lot more backstage power than most. Stone Cold Steve Austin challenged creative decisions plenty of times in his career. He apparently reneged on plans to turn WrestleMania 15's main event into a triple threat, but that may have been because Shawn Michaels got in his ear. He famously walked out after he was told to lose to Brock Lesnar on free TV. Sorry, I mean, he took his ball and went home. Gotta use that WWE branded verbiage, pal. He also outright refused to work with people, including a certain pseudo-country singer in 1999. Jeff Jarrett had returned to the Federation 2 years earlier, and WWE had plans to push him into a feud with the Texas Rattlesnake. However, this was cancelled because the two were far from friends in real life. Double J had called out the Austin 316 promo as blasphemous, and Stone Cold had been unhappy with the way he was treated whilst working for Jeff's father in his rookie days. As a result, the Bionic Redneck vetoed working with Jarrett, and that was that. Tough luck, Slapnuts. Number 3, anyone but Shawn. The Montreal Screwjob. We meet again, old friend. Many commentators, including us, have spoken at great length about what happened at Survivor Series 97. There's been much debate over who was in the wrong and what could have been done to prevent it, but it's important to remember that Bret Hart's stubbornness did play a part in the events. The Hitman was on his way to WCW after the company revealed that they couldn't afford to honor his existing contract. Problem was, he was WWE champion at the time, and he absolutely despised the man who was supposed to take it off him. Once again, many words have been spoken about how much Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels hated each other. What made things worse in Hart's eyes was that he was being asked to lose in his home country, where he was treated as a minor deity. In the end, Hart refused to lose to Michaels on the night, which set in motion the entire chain of events that we are still discussing all these years later. Why couldn't you have just agreed, Bret? Oh yeah, because HBK was a prick and told the Hitman that he wouldn't lose to him first. Let's move on. Number 2, One Night Only. Speaking of Shawn Michaels being a prick, the One Night Only pay-per-view from 1997 was another event emanating from the good old U of K. Like with SummerSlam 92, Davey Boy Smith once again found himself in the main event of a show in his home country. This time, he was defending the European Championship against... oh no, Shawn Michaels. Not only did the showstopper manage to wrangle the main event spot over Bret Hart versus The Undertaker, but he also got the booking team to change the result and have him go over Davey instead of the other way around. This after the Bulldog had already dedicated his upcoming match to his cancer-stricken sister. Wow. And what did Michaels do with the belt he had politicked so hard for? He literally laid down for Triple H so he could win the title instead. Seriously, Shawn, it's not hard to see why people really didn't like you back in the day. He may have been one of the worst when it came to playing the old creative control card, but there is one very obvious name who has old Shawn beat. Number 1, that doesn't work for me, brother. How else could we finish a list about worming out of things without talking about King Worm himself, Hulk Hogan? The Hulkster was reportedly responsible for dozens of squashed pushes, changed finishes, and general career derailments throughout his time in the industry. We don't have the time to mention all of them here, so let's focus on one example from both WWE and WCW. In Ted Turner's house, Hogan used his status to refuse to lose to Sting at Starrcade 97. This is according to Eric Bischoff, who admittedly also said that this was the only time in the promotion that Hogan used his creative control. Sure thing, Eric. As for his time in WWE, let's talk about the time he went one-on-one with the Showstopper. A planned 3-match series between the two was replaced by a single bout at SummerSlam 2005 after Hogan decided he didn't want to lose. In the end, Michaels got the last laugh though. You know what I'm talking about.